All right, we are live. This is the Sherdog Radio Network live recap for UFC 309, Jones versus Miocic, which wrapped up at Madison Square Garden just a few minutes ago. I am accompanied this evening by the Dayne Fox, newest member of the Sherdog podcast and writing contributor team. Dayne, how you doing this evening?
Doing good. Enjoyed the fights tonight. And always happy to talk about face punching.
Yeah, face punching. We had some face punching, face squeezing, body kicking. The main event, Jon Jones walks in looking and came out looking every bit the minus 700 favorite he was, as he won effectively every second of the fight up until the brutal finish late in the third round. I didn't talk to you too much ahead of this, so I don't know whether you picked Jones to win. I'm kind of assuming you probably did. But yes. Did the fight play out like you expected? Did anything surprise you? What jumped out to you as you watched this? And in the chat, I see you guys are bumping already. Bob Chimpson is letting us have it over my continuing to defend Jonathan Martinez. We'll get to him when we get to him. All of you, be nice to each other. Feel free to shit on me. That's what I get paid to be here. Be nice to each other. Shit on me. But let us know what you thought about the main event as well. Did Jones look that great? Did Miocic just look that bad? Is it a little of column A, a little of column B? But Dayne, I asked you a question like 3 minutes ago and then kept talking. Give me your thoughts on this main event.
That's fine. I think the people prefer the dulcet tones of your voices to mine anyway. So as far as who looked bad and who looked good, a little of column A and a little of column B. Miocic certainly did not look like he deserved the title shot, which shouldn't necessarily be a surprise. Despite what Dominic Cruz says, ring rust is a real thing. If you haven't been in there, if you haven't been able to get things going, you're more than likely going to look like you haven't been there for a while. Only I would say the tippy top of those at the Mount Rushmore have been able to really do that effectively, i.e. like GSP when he moved up and defeated Bisping. But for the most part, if you haven't fought in a while, it's going to look like it. And it definitely looked like it for Stipe. And it doesn't help the fact that he's now 42. And yes, heavyweights do tend to age slower than other weight classes, but Stipe is also a 42 that's been fighting the top of the heavyweight class. So taking those brutal battles with Cormier, that'll take something out of you. Francis, he ate some heavy shots from Francis in both of those fights. Stipe certainly had some wear and tear on him, and waiting 4 years, I kept hearing Rogan say, "Oh no, I think the weight was a good thing." Bullshit. Sorry. I thought that was one of the dumber takes that Rogan's had in quite a while. But yeah, Stipe looked bad more than anything. And that's not to say I thought Jones looked great. Jones didn't look at the tip-top shape of himself either. But again, over the last 5 years, he's fought 90 seconds going into this fight. So
yeah, I mean, I'm probably a little higher on both guys right now than you sound. Like I'm looking at Stipe. He looks like a bulked up, not necessarily in a good way. Yeah, I mean, it was muscle. It's not like he walked in there with a gut, but maybe 15 extra pounds of muscle wasn't the best thing to do between ages, 39 and 42. But nonetheless, most of the component parts of his game still seem to be there. Like I'm thinking right now, is Miocic completely washed? No. I mean, he's certainly on his way there, but would I have taken the guy that fought Jones in the cage tonight over, say, Marcin Tybura or Diniz that fought earlier on the card? Maybe, probably. We got to see for real what it's going to look like when Jones takes on UFC heavyweights at this point. And it's interesting, the components of his game that were devastating at light heavyweight versus the ones that were, I don't want to say weaknesses, because again, the guy's never really lost a fight, but things that like his strengths would kind of cover for him. Like despite the fact that he is a freakish athlete. I mean, he's the only one of his brothers that didn't play in the NFL. He never had the fastest hands at 205, but he covered for it by really just not basing his offense on punching. Like, he didn't develop a jab until shockingly late in his kind of development as a mixed martial artist, because he was doing fine kicking people, hitting them with spinning elbows, or more often in the early going, just taking him down and elbowing the shit out of him. Tonight, yeah, part of it is that Stipe looked slow. Part of it is that heavyweights are just going to be slower, period. But Jones's jab all of a sudden was a weapon. That's the best his jab has ever looked. Considering that, he's got, everyone talks about his wingspan, but Jones's legs are incredibly long as well. Considering what his leg reach is like, his kicks were snappy as ever. Like, they were fast, they were accurate. Miocic couldn't do much about them.
Yeah, I'm with you as far as that goes. Like I said, I didn't necessarily think that Jones looked terrible, but not by any means. But he didn't look like the whirlwind that he can be. And I think Jones needs somebody to piss him off for us to get the best version of Jones that we see.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he was trying to create controversy when there wasn't really anything there. One of the better highlights of the past week was him saying, telling Stipe he doesn't want him talking about his kids, and that just confused the ever-living crap out of Stipe. He's like, I didn't say anything about your kids. Jones was trying to manufacture that animosity out of nowhere.
No.
And so I think that was one of the reasons why we didn't see it. Stipe's hard to hate, if we're being honest. So,
like, what could you possibly dislike about him? He's a non-trash talker. In his prime, at least, he was a very exciting fighter. He's a great fighter. He's a firefighter. Like, yeah. He is literally the kind of first responder that the UFC cannot stop falling over itself to, like, thank and congratulate. And yeah, like, he should be one of the sport's ultimate good guys.
Yes.
Because of having a slightly bland personality and an actual physical speech impediment, he never really crossed over into superstardom.
Yes.
Marcus Mustard asks, Jones was always destined for heavyweight. Would you guys agree? Not undersized. Yeah, he's not undersized at all. He was 238 pounds tonight. If you list the 10 greatest heavyweights in MMA history, like, whoever you think they are, like you watching, you, Dane, like talking to me, if you list your 10 greatest heavyweights in MMA history, 9 of them are going to be between 235 and 249 pounds. That's where they all fall. Like in their prime, at their best. He's always been capable of carrying that kind of weight, because that's how much he weighs in shape in between camps. Like, we saw him tonight, what he looks like in great shape, but not cutting to 205. He definitely has always had a body for heavyweight. I know some people, even back in 2019, 2020, when he was sort of doing his second lap around the light heavyweight division, some people, would try to create the narrative that he's scared to move up to heavyweight. He's scared to fight these big guys. And it's like, Daniel Cormier, is your heavyweight champ, and Jones dusted him. Like, what do you think he's afraid of? So, yeah, he was always destined for heavyweight. And the good news is, at 37, if his health holds up, short of this crazy pec injury, he's been pretty healthy for the most part. He's really in his prime as a heavyweight. Like, I say, go back to your list of your own personal list of the 10 greatest heavyweights of all time. A lot of them did a lot of their best work after age 34 or so. You look at Cormier himself, Verdum. Verdum was still winning high level stuff after age 35. So yeah, if Jones feels like it, the only thing, I guess there are 3 things really that might put a cap on how long he does this at heavyweight. His own motivation, just how long does he want to keep doing it, his own health, and Tom Aspinall, the 261-pound gorilla in the room. Oh, yeah. JSX, Randy Couture. You mean the guy that was like 34 when he debuted as a fighter and did literally everything he did after age 34? Yeah. Different era, obviously. Well, several different eras. Like, he was. But yeah, I one thing that Jones seems to have left behind him after moving up to heavyweight is he ain't a slow starter anymore. It used to be kind of the real narrative on him was he would typically, if not give away the first round, not really engage until late in the round. He would spend that time just kind of feeling out his opponent, getting the range, getting the rhythm, doing a few weird things to give his opponent something to think about. And for a guy who in the cage is kind of conservative and creative at the same time, I think it did a great job at just preventing him from blundering into one big punch from an inferior fighter. Like, no,
he fought a very smart game plan tonight. There's absolutely no doubt about that. And I think he reminded the world what he does best, because once he got Stipe on the mat in the first round, he went to town with him on the ground and pound. And I don't feel like he was able to get into his best position and truly let fly. Those slicing elbows that he's let loose before. He was trying to get him off, but I don't think he quite got the full dig on him. And we didn't get to see any of the 12-6 that are now legal. But he definitely got some brutal shots in there, cut up Stipe at the very end. And like I said, I don't feel like that was Jones getting his worst off, and he still looked like an absolute beast doing that.
Yeah, completely agree. And John Butterfield brings up a point that I wanted to make. I think for as long as Jones wants to do this, and I may be proven wrong when he runs into a Tom Aspinall or a Curtis Blades, like just a legit huge dude who's a very good wrestler. But thus far, through 2 fights, 1, Jones is no longer a slow starter, and 2, he is taking very good heavyweights down look childishly easy.
Yeah.
I mean, the way he handled Cyril Gane in his last fight, basically folding him like a washboard at the base of the cage. I mean, that's the exact same thing John Jones would do if he got me on the ground, like a little faster. But he made a top 5 heavyweight just look childish. And then here, a former college wrestler who had 10 or 15 pounds of muscle on him, he gets him with just a slick outside trip that just dumps him on his head like it's his first day in judo class or something.
Yeah.
Like, Jones he's been dominant for 15 years now, but moving into a division where the guys, yes, they're bigger, but they're less skilled and less athletic, it's been almost comical so far at best, just how easy he's making it look. Yeah, I'm struggling to think of more to say here. I mean,
that's kind of the problem with this matchup. We waited several years for it, if we're being honest, because there was always rumors that John was going to move up. Stipe said he wasn't fighting unless it was for the title. And, as great as a heavyweight champion that Stipe has been, and as great as John is still, this doesn't feel like this fight was worth the hype. And I kind of think that's what fans were getting at when they were saying, no, we want Aspinall. We don't want Stipe. The time for that has come and gone. So, I mean, I don't want to shit all over it, but it does kind of feel a little bit flat for a Madison Square Garden main event, but yeah, like you said, we've said all we really can say. Jones looks a little bit slower. Still looks like he could, I think he can still beat Aspinall. I know there's a lot of people that say he's scared of him. I don't think he's scared of him. I just think he's well aware that Aspinall is going to be the toughest challenge out there. Jones is very protective of his legacy. And he's, as intelligent of a fighter as Jones is, I don't know if there's many people who had fighting come as naturally to them as far as the mental side of things as it does for Jones. It's not going to be a walk in the park for Aspinall to beat Jones. That fight I'm very much looking forward to.
Me too. It is probably the fight that might realistically be made that I'm most excited to see next year.
Yes.
You know, like just literal dream matchups aside, that's up there. And yeah, I completely agree with you that, okay, John Jones is not scared of anybody.
No.
Like, I mean, I've spoken to a lot of fighters over the years, from the best in the world to guys that are, 1-0 fighting in local shows. Almost none of them are scared. Jones is not scared of anybody. But yeah, he has to approach this in an attitude of managing risk, because MMA does not have a retirement plan. Well, and its absence of a retirement plan leads to most of the most depressing stories out of MMA. Like, just looking at former great fighters who at one time made a lot of money in really dire circumstances. I mean, hell, think of Mark Coleman selling his pride trophies and needing donations to get hip replacements,
and still living with his parents.
Yeah. Well, luckily for them, since he saved them from a fire, but
yeah. But that does illustrate the point. The guy hasn't been able to live on his own at this point. So,
but I mean, say you're John Jones, and you're not telling this to everybody, but maybe in your own head, and maybe to your closest confidants, maybe to your managers, the Keller brothers. You're like, okay, realistically, I think I'm going to fight 3 or 4 more times, and you know that if you win your next fight, the next 2 you're going to make probably between $5 and $10 million a piece. If you lose the next one, you're probably going to make between $2 and $3 million a piece. That is literally your family's whole. That's your family's whole future right there. Yeah. He cares about being the best. He cares about his legacy, but it is prize fighting. He's fighting for prizes, and he has to be aware of the risk. But yeah, when the time is right and the numbers on the paper are right, he's going to fight Tom Aspinall.
Yeah.
And I can't wait to see it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, exactly. I think he's been playing the long game on this one. Stipe was going to be an easy paycheck for him. I think he calculated that correctly, and deal with Tom afterward, build up the hype, and Jones isn't stupid. He knows that if there's people out there that believe that he's scared of Tom, that it's going to hype up the event even that much more. So Jones isn't stupid.
And Aspinall himself keeps kind of wavering back and forth between talking a little bit of shit at Jones and then kind of stepping back and being respectful and walking a few things back. Honestly, it feels when lesser rappers go at Eminem and they're not sure quite how hard to go at him. Any other general thoughts on this one before we move on? Or I guess I should ask, what do you think should be next? It sounds like we both think Aspinall should be next for Jones at this point.
Oh yeah.
I
know that there's discussions for Pereira, but Pereira's got Magomed Ankalaev to deal with. That's another fighter that somebody's allegedly scared of. But yeah, let's let the divisions play out, and at that point, they'll have cleared out their respective challengers, and if Jones wants to go for one more money fight, let's do it.
Assuming Stipe Miocic wants to fight again, what do you do with him?
He did say that he's retiring, so
okay,
I didn't give it a hell of a lot of thought. But if he does come back, Blades?
I was thinking Gunnar Blades. So yeah, I mean it's the one place where it's easy, the one place where Miocic's absence makes things easier is in terms of booking him, because he's been out for a couple of years. Then before that, he had several fights in a row with he fought a lot of the same people more than once. So for a 42-year-old former champ, he's actually a kind of a fresh face in the top 10. It's weird.
Jones is the only person on the roster he has fought. Everybody else has been cut, retired, or released.
There you go. Prior to that, we had a 5-round rematch of a lightweight title fight from 4 years ago between Charles the Bronx Oliveira and Michael Chandler. This one ended with Chandler winning a pretty dominant decision, and
Who won?
utterly dominant decision until the 5th round, where Chandler all of a sudden hurt him, and things got real interesting for about 4 minutes. Any what jumped out of you, or what jumped out at you about this? Let's move on to this, just so like we can make Bob Simpson stop talking about Aspinall, because guys, Bob is a good dude, but he is an utter troll. Like he's literally covered. He's been on one of these shows with us before.
Yes, he has.
And his feints are working on you guys. You're biting on everything. But yeah, so we can move on from that, and I can move on from Ant Walker like dissing me for using Eminem as my as my example. Like, it's the whitest thing I'll do all day. I apologize. It was terrible. All right, but okay, the Bronx versus Chandler.
Yeah, and Butterfield caught what I was saying. Yes, it was Oliveira who won. You had a slip of the tongue and said Chandler won. That's why I was like, wait, Chandler? Anyway.
Oh, sorry.
It happens, man. But yeah, no, it was a lot of fun. I mean, for 4 rounds, that was about as one-sided as a fight gets. But the fact that Chandler was scraping tooth and nail to stay in there and try to pull out some last-minute upset, which he damn near did in the 5th round, made it an entertaining fight. So, yeah, it might have been one-sided, but it was still a pretty fun fight to watch. I think it establishes 2 things. Number one, once again, we talked about ring rust with regards to Stipe. Ring rust is real because Chandler did not look he looked like he'd been out of the cage for a little while. Oliveira is still one of the best lightweights in the world, and I don't think that there's anybody that's going to be upset if he gets a title shot off of this win. I think that we might need to slow our roll, but we can get to that a little bit later. But and lastly, I think probably more importantly with regards to all of this, Chandler is one of the all-time dogs, because that was one of the guttiest performances. Like most guys would have had their spirit broken by that 5th round. He damn near pulled off the win, and even more of a credit to him, he looked like he was having a damn good time in there, despite having his ass beat for 4 rounds. I mean, he's picking him up with Oliveira riding his back and this just jumping back straight onto him. That's a moment that's going to be remembered. Yeah, Chandler lost the fight, but he won over a hell of a lot of fans in that moment.
He did, and there were a number of fights tonight where I felt as though both fighters' stock fell in victory or defeat. This is one where I think both guys came out looking okay. Yes, Oliveira outclassed Chandler for most of the fight, but he's going to do that when against people not named Islam Makhachev. The Bronx have been on a hell of a run in the last 5 years, but how many fighters that are down that bad and have been getting dog walked that bad come out in the 5th round and actually try to win the fight? And actually do what their coaches say and actually show a sense of urgency. It's so rare, even among the highest level fighters. I completely agree that there's not a bit of quit in Chandler. He's now 2-4 in the UFC, and it's about the roughest 2-4 I can think of in the history of the promotion. Because the quote unquote worst fighter he's fought was, a pretty dilapidated Tony Ferguson. Everyone else he's fought has ranged from good to great, and in every single one of the losses, he's had moments where he coulda, shoulda, maybe won.
Yep.
I said this on the preview for this show. I was there at UFC 262 when they fought for the title, and if there had been just a slightly twitchier ref, Michael Chandler might have been your champ by 1st round TKO, and it wouldn't have been an absurdly early stoppage. Like, I'm sure there would have been an immediate rematch. His reign might not have lasted that long, but that's how close Chandler's been. So, yeah, just good stuff from him. And Charles Oliveira, I I don't even want to expend the brain power right now to put him in a list of greatest this or greatest that. But I will say that the version of him that we have right now and have had since about 2018 is easily top 5 my favorite fighters to watch ever. Just so confident, so creative. And because I watched when he was kind of a glass cannon head case that I figured would never string together enough wins or even enough successful weigh-ins to become a contender, to see that he became what he's become now makes me feel a little bit good inside. I think it was someone in the UFC booth tonight. Contrary to my usual, I left the sound on. I think it was probably Rogan that called him like a mixture of cautious and reckless. And I think that's the perfect description. Like that takedown in the first round. I've never seen anything like that in 25 years of watching MMA. Like it was wild, and he has just got to be the most hellish guy to be on the ground with.
Oh yeah.
Like he's not even like this skinny finesse 20-year-old kid anymore. He's strong as fuck. He's mean on top. All of a sudden, he's a great offensive wrestler, and he's a pretty damn good defensive wrestler when not dealing with people named Islam Makhachev. Yeah, he's got a meanness that he just didn't have 10 years ago. Great stuff out of Charles Oliveira. What is he next in line for a title shot? Do you give him the winner of Makhachev versus Sarukian?
Ooh, the question I have is how long is it going to be before we see Sarukian and Makhachev? If we see that in January, as it is currently rumored, I'm okay with that. I think I wouldn't mind seeing Oliveira rematch either one of them. If not, though, Max Holloway says that he's probably John Butterfield, exactly. I was thinking that it would be fun to see him and Max do the rematch, because if we're being honest, we never really got a true first match between the two of them. There was that weird esophageal injury or whatever it was that Oliveira had.
Esophageal like bullshit. I quit in the cage injury.
Yes,
like he never showed receipts for that. Like he full on quit. It is the perfect example of how much Charles Oliveira has changed.
Yes,
like. The dude that quit when he realized that he was going to get punched 250 times by Max Holloway if he stayed in there, that guy is gone. Yeah, like J-Sex calls it the panic quote injury. Like that's it. And that might as well be a completely different human being than Charles Oliveira is right now.
Yeah. So, like I said, depends upon when we do see Arman and Makhachev. If we're going to be waiting a while for that, let's book Oliveira with Holloway, because everybody wants to see that. We never really have seen it yet, so yeah, let's do that.
I would be okay with that, except that Chandler said he'd like to fight Holloway, and I also want to see that. And I feel I don't know what to do there. Like, what do you do with Chandler then? He didn't retire in the cage. No, he didn't.
No. Yeah. With Chandler, well, okay, you are right in the sense that his 2-4 UFC record is probably the best damn 2-4 record that we've ever seen, given the competition that he has fought. But he is 2-4, so I kind of feel like a step down is warranted. But I don't think that Mateusz Gamrot would be a massive step down by any means. I think that would be a fun fight, and a win right there gets him right back into the mix with the tops.
And it would probably be exciting as hell. But like, I can't remember a boring Michael Chandler fight going back now, even just to the beginning of his Bellator days when he was like 4-0. And Gamrot is one of the people that I will offer up whenever I get a casual, fan friend that thinks wrestling-based fighters are boring. Like, yeah, go watch Mateusz Gamrot versus, and Chandler versus Patty, says J-Sex. I mean, Patty's mouth continues to write checks, and his ass continues to cover them thus far. I would be 100% down to see it. I'm in report. I think you were the only one of us, I'm in report, that was brave enough to speak that into existence or not be afraid that you're speaking it out of existence and jinxing us. That's the fight that Chandler finally gave up on waiting for. I've kind of given up on waiting for it, but if and when McGregor wants to come back, Chandler at 170 feels like the fight to me.
Yeah, if it's still a possibility for it to happen, I have no problem with that. I think it'd be great for Chandler to get that payday because he waited 2 years for it. But yeah, I'm with Ben. I don't think it's happening. That's why I didn't mention it.
Completely off topic, but I'll throw it out for Bob. Are we ready for Kron Gracie to submit Bryce Mitchell? Shout out to Devin Tejada, host of the Check the Kick podcast on Sherdog.com, also a regular on these recaps and previews, for saying, is Kron Gracie versus Bryce Mitchell the first ever fight between two guys that believe the earth is flat? And I was like, dude, how many BJJ black belts have you met? I swear half of them think the earth is flat, and the farther up the hierarchy you go, the higher that proportion gets. Just because you are great at one thing does not make you brilliant at everything.
Oh, yeah.
That's all I'll say. Yeah, Pope Chandler called out McGregor in the ring after the loss tonight. And, dude, Chandler is so good on the mic. And I don't mean good on the mic in like a just trash talk sense. Like, he's not Bisping or Chael or Colby. It feels like having an NFL player in MMA, just someone that's been through actual media training. It's just such and with just a little bit of pro wrestler in him. But yeah. He's always a joy at press conferences.
Well, with Chandler, it feels more off the cuff. With Shell, he always had his script. Colby, he's always got a script. Bisping's a little bit more off the cuff as well, but there's always been a little bit of scriptedness to him too. Chandler, it's more off the cuff, so I've always enjoyed him in that aspect as well.
The smartest thing in the cage will be a sponsorship logo, even though it's a logo for like hymns or some shit. Like, exactly. Yep.
No, it's going to be a sponsorship for power drills. Glad you caught that.
Now with a double safety switch.
Damn straight.
Get Chandler in the commentary booth, says John Butterfield. I could not agree more. He strikes me as the kind of guy that would just slot immediately in like a Paul Felder type, a guy that knows all of his shit incredibly well and has an engaging personality that's not like over the top.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think he would enjoy the comparison, but Paul Felder right now is like the little black dress of the commentary, squad. Like, he just goes with everything perfectly. Bob Timpson says Kron will dominate Bryce Mitchell. Yes, he will. Bryce Mitchell is a very good MMA grappler. Kron Gracie is one of the greatest grapplers of his generation in his general weight range. Yeah, completely agree. And would beat him in a debate. It really depends on what they're debating about. Any other thoughts on Chandler versus Oliveira before we move on to the people's main event?
Fun fight. The last round completely stole the show, and I think that's probably going to be the fight that most people talk about going away from it.
Oh, dude, that round with just, well, obviously first like the knockdown and Chandler swarming for the finish, and then him with Oliveira on his back, like just throwing himself to the ground multiple times, trying to knock him out or knock him off. It felt like the end of a pro wrestling match.
Yes,
but
100%.
In a real fight. It was fantastic. Prior to that, middleweight action between undefeated prospect Bo Nickal and perennial spoiler trap fight, tough out, occasional fringe contender in two divisions, Paul Craig. Nickal walked in as one of the 5 or 6 biggest betting favorites of the year in the UFC, and he's also at least one of the other top 5. Minus 1,100, about as big spread as you'll find in a late notice fight in the modern UFC. Okay, so if you're watching this right now, you're probably a regular of our previews. You know that Bo Nickal is the closest thing the Shillen and Duffy show has to an official state religion. And while we make it a point to mention him every single episode as kind of a running gag, both of us really do believe in him as a top-notch prospect, likely future title contender, maybe a future champ. I certainly do, and Keith is even higher on him than I am. And considering that Keith knows more about wrestling than I do, even though I know it well, you may want to take his word over mine. Having said that, we didn't see any of that wrestling tonight. He got in a tepid striking match with Craig, who, for all of his incredible come-from-behind submission wins, all of his amazing toughness, might be the worst striker in the middleweight division. So what we really learned tonight is that Bo Nickal can barely outstrike the worst striker in the UFC middleweight division without using his wrestling.
Yeah, and you know what? We got to give Bob Chimpson some credit. Some of these lines that he's throwing out there might not be trolls right now. He did not look like a 1,500 favorite. That is absolutely true.
Absolutely.
Whether Keith ducked the show because Bo didn't look great, no comment.
Okay, I mean, Keith is there at Madison Square Garden right now. So.
I know that, but yeah.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, no, it was very tepid. I'm not as down on Bo as a lot of people are going to be walking out of this, because we all know that Bo's not a great striker. You know, this is something that he's just barely picking up. But the fact that he was able to win a fight against a guy that has wins over the likes of Paul Craig and Jamal Hill. Hill was a champion not too long after Craig beat him. That's still something to be able to put upon his mantle, so to speak. It did not look good, no, but he can win a striking battle if he needs to, even if it is against somebody who's not a very good striker. You know, I get that. But the fact that he did it without his wrestling is the main thing that people need to take away. Not the fact that he looked shitty. It's the fact that he won a fight without using his wrestling, and that is his bread and butter. Again, I understand the idea that, okay, maybe we need to slow the roll a little bit. I think that's very understandable because, you know, there was a lot of talk about, okay, let's give him a ranked opponent after this heading into the fight. I don't think they're going to be doing that after this point.
I don't think so either. And the thing is, this isn't boxing.
No.
If Nickal loses a fight in his first 10 or 12 fights, it's not the end of the world. In fact, it may end up being the best thing for him because it will end all of the outcry for him to, be matched too soon against top fighters. I have the feeling he is going to lose one along the way. And depending on how he loses, it's not going to make me jump off the train here. What we have right now in Nickal is an ultra elite practitioner of one component skill of MMA that I happen to think is the most important one, that is definitely a work in progress everywhere else. I thought he fought with composure tonight. The crowd started booing and chanting stuff at him pretty quickly. And all of that chanting and all of that booing, it's all motivation for Nickal to do something that might cause him to lose in spectacular fashion to a less skilled fighter. So, I mean, it didn't make him many new fans tonight, but to have the composure to ignore that when plenty of fighters are overwhelmed by the moment, sometimes in moments that are not even as big as this one, that's not a bad thing.
Agreed.
Yeah, a lot of people already throwing out possible next matchups for Nickal. We got Kyle Lawheed. What up, Kyle? Saying Bo versus Brad Tavares. I don't know if you actually mean that or you're just making fun of that phase where Keith and I suggested Brad Tavares for anybody in the middleweight division that we needed a matchup for. Nickal versus RoboCop. RoboCop is a name I thought of and discarded as being too much too soon for Nickal. Like I think Gregory Rodriguez would probably beat Bo Nickal pretty bad right now. Which, I mean, why do that to him? Like, if he gets just knocked out by RoboCop, he becomes less marketable as a potential contender, and he probably doesn't learn too much. let's see who else threw one out there. Nickal versus I assume you mean Gregory Rodriguez as well. If you mean Daniel Rodriguez, I like that. Just have Daniel Rodriguez move up. John Butterfield says, if Bo's not hurt, book him against Chris Weidman. Bo sure didn't look hurt. If he was hurt, I can't imagine how he did it. Beating Craig, then Weidman would be against for an 8-0 guy, if he can, of course. If Weidman looks as bad as I think he's going to next time he's in the cage, Nickal has no excuse not to beat him. I guess we'll see. Names I threw out are people that are coming off of wins, but maybe not in the top 15 right now. One name was Jin Young Park, but he might be a little too much. I was thinking of Abus Magomedov, who went from cut list material to, all right, I guess this guy's going to stick around for a while because of, 2 back-to-back wins. That seems like a suitable one as well. I don't see the point in pushing him too far too soon. Why run even the risk of making like an Aaron Pico out of him? So
yeah. I'd probably agree with John Butterfield. Give him a name because the UFC still has an interest in him. They still want to pump him up. So MMA is a cruel sport. You don't want to necessarily be too cruel to these guys that are older and getting up there. But I guarantee you that if you asked Chris Weidman if he wanted to fight Bo Nickal, he'd say hell yeah. So.
Yep, Chris Weidman absolutely believes that he's going to win back the title. That's just him. The UFC would never do it, but one name I threw out was Bo Nickal versus Shara Bullet. Like 2 hype trains enter, 1 leaves. They won't do that. Nope. No, they won't. They won't do that. For one thing, we could probably count on both hands like the countries they could even book that in. Any other thoughts on Craig versus Nickal versus Craig before we move on?
Just pointing out that's 3 losses in a row for Craig. I'm impressed that he's been able to make middleweight and he looks good, but I still think he's probably better off going up to 205, just where fight IQ is something that's missing, and I think he could better capitalize on his submission skills there.
Preach. It was actually Dev who pointed out that to me that light heavyweight is the low fight IQ division. Like, heavyweight is the low skill division. Light heavyweight is the low fight IQ division. Like, most of the top fighters are very athletic. Almost all of them can hit hard. All of them are very good at least one part of MMA, and most of them are at least somewhat well-rounded. But you just can't trust even the top fighters to not be. Dude, only in that division does Yuri Prohaska become a champ. I love the guy, but a guy that reckless and that just weird in and out of the cage doesn't win a title in most divisions. So I agree with you because this is going to sound dismissive of Paul Craig, and I don't want it to because I love the guy as a fighter, but his routes to victory usually involve his opponent making a mistake. That's it. Yep. Like, he's the anti-Khabib. Khabib, you knew exactly what was coming. Nobody could stop it. Boom. Your game plan didn't matter. Paul Craig is the opposite. He's fighting faster guys every time, better wrestlers every time, better strikers every time, and yet he's 9-9 in the UFC right now, I think. And he has 9 wins, and in every single one, it's because his opponent made a mistake.
The whole week leading up to the Jamal Hill-Paul Craig fight was Hill talking about how he's confident in his ability to go to the ground with Craig. It's like, really, buddy? And lo and behold, he went down there, and it ended up being one of the most nasty-looking arm bars we've ever seen. So, I caramba. Yeah. Go back up, Paul.
Prior to that, we had I would say Brazil on Brazil violence, but it wasn't a very violent fight as Viviane Araújo and Karine Silva went at it. When I said before that there were a number of fights on this card where I came out feeling worse about both fighters, this may be the big one. This had the ability, if somebody really showed out, to have title implications. Like, if Silva just absolutely dusted Araújo, then, she might not be next in line for a title shot, but Mick Maynard isn't having to go far down his speed dial if people start getting injured before she's getting the call.
Yeah.
It's finally the name contender that she needed. Same as, if Araujo just, punts Silva into the third row, then okay, at 37, I guess she's not done yet. Instead, this was just the most women's flyweight fight ever. There were moments of Silva just running at Araujo, just throwing these like butterfly net hooks with just no technique at all. It was just a bad fight. Just it wasn't great MMA is the best way I can put it. It's concerning that Silva, as the younger fighter, gassed out as well. That's concerning for me because at women's flyweight, most of the top fighters have at least 3 rounds of cardio, if not 5. Like, just even at the highest levels, just fatigue usually has not been the deciding factor. So if Silva wants to make a run at the Shevchenkos, the Grassos, hell, apparently even the Araujos of the world, she can't have her cardio be a liability.
No, I 100% agree with you. For Silva to be put in this spot where she was a favorite over Araujo at the Madison Square Garden card, she kind of shit the bed with this performance. She was being given a big opportunity and just couldn't pull through. And that's even saying that it was a close fight that, it very well could have gone in her favor. I was kind of surprised to hear it was a unanimous decision, but, is what it is. But the fact that it was that close of a fight and she's coming out looking that bad, that's speaking ill of Araujo as well. So it's a fight I don't want to go into too much more detail on, just because there's not a lot of positive to say about it. Araujo maintains her spot in the top 10, and Silva needs a little bit more polish.
Oh man, don't forget the fight-ending head and arm throw. If there's anything worse than like the scarf hold like throw, I don't know what it is. And I say that as somebody who leaned on that heavily in my like high school wrestling days. I shouldn't have. It's a sloppy and dangerous technique. It only worked because I wrestled a lot of bad guys. I don't know. Prior to that, continuing the trend of fighters having to justify outlandish odds, Mauricio Ruffy, the newest darling of the fight nerds, came in as, I think, a minus 800 favorite against Hamis Yantop. On top of that, Yantop blew weight, and he blew weight even compared to the, kind of makeshift catch weight that they made. I mean, he weighed in like 166 pounds, and the guy is theoretically a lightweight. But yeah, Mauricio Ruffy might still be a future contender, a future champ at 155, but he did himself no favors here. The fight was closer than it needed to be. I just said this about Silva, but it's even worse in this case. Mauricio Ruffy visibly gassed in the third round.
Oh yeah.
Nobody with bad cardio goes anywhere at lightweight. That needs to be fixed now.
Oh, and what's even worse about that is Ruffy doesn't fight at a nonstop pace either. If he gets in the cage with somebody who's going to force him to wrestle, grapple, all that fun stuff, clinch against the cage, he's going to be in some serious trouble because he has a very deliberate pace.
He is, yes, and he's dependent on being able to dictate that pace. I completely on board with you here. And when he runs into, say Mateusz Gamrot type, that's going to be relentless in trying to get the fight to the ground. He's not going to give Ruffy the space to set up the counter punches that he wants to. He could have rough sledding. He's still on the young side. He has some uncoachable power and speed. I'm not completely giving up on him, but there's some clear things he needs to go back and get right with.
He's still a good prospect, but I also think that the broadcast probably put too high of expectations on him from the beginning. They were, I know. Okay, yeah, you did say you were listening to the commentary this time around. They were comparing him to Conor McGregor with regards to his stance and whatnot. And while I can see that comparison with the way that he was standing, you have to be very careful with any sort of comparison to McGregor because, the uneducated hear that and they're like, oh, they're comparing this guy to Conor McGregor. I get it was just the stance, but that's not something you just throw around.
Completely agree. And yeah, like to make that kind of comparison, even as good as I think Ruffy is, that is short selling just what a remarkable fluid technician McGregor was on his way up. Like all the way up, I would say, through the Alvarez fight where he won his second title. Just such a smart, nuanced, subtle striking game. Some of the best stuff we've ever seen, and it didn't last mostly because Conor's such a maniac outside the cage. I think he's just been burning his candle at both ends, and he was an unconscionable weight bully at 145. Anyway, I'll throw one thing out, and I feel bad saying this about a fighter who stepped up on short notice, and I say it in full recognition of the fact that I could stand to lose a few pounds, but for James Yontop, he looked like a guy that could make 155 without issue if he changed up a few things. He looked soft for a UFC lightweight. That's the best way I can put it. Like I can tell you exactly where that extra 10 pounds is. And generally, I can't do that with, again, UFC lightweights.
If he's having that much trouble, then just jump up to 170. And, Gastelum was able to make a decent career at 185 by eating fish sticks and stuff like that. That's one of my favorite stories. You've heard that one, right?
Wait, who did?
Oh, Gastelum. He was asking what he needed to eat to be able to start making weight, to eat healthy, and somebody suggested fish, so he went out and bought a bunch of fish sticks. I think that's fantastic. But anyway,
that is so Kelvin Gastelum. like generally speaking, Gastelum has had his weight issues, and he's also popped for weed. And I'm one of what I feel like is the majority of Americans who think weed should probably be legal in every situation alcohol is. Like, please don't drive a car or operate heavy machinery. Otherwise, do you at home. And I feel it should be allowed out of competition in the UFC, except in the case of Kelvin Gastelum. Because if marijuana is a gateway drug to one thing, that one thing is tacos. And that's what he doesn't need. So, yeah that sounds very much Gastelum-like to me. Anyway, Mauricio Ruffy versus Thomas Yontop. I feel like we learned a few things about both guys, but in spite of the fact that Ruffy won, I came away with concerns about him. Whereas I feel like, Yontop has lost 3 straight fights now, I think. But I would hate to see the UFC cut him. Like, we'll get to our cut list in a bit. I would hate to see the UFC cut him as young as he is and the kind of promise he has. He just needs to get a strength and conditioning coach. Prior to that, Jonathan Martinez, probably after Bo Nickal, the fighter I will get the most shit over, based on what I said about him on the preview. Like, plenty of people, have come at me, and I'm not the only person to say this, for going with Martinez's narrative that in his fight against Jose Aldo, he was overwhelmed by the moment. That's why he never pulled the trigger. Well, apparently he was overwhelmed by the moment here as well and never pulled the trigger. Is there anything more frustrating to watch in combat sports, period, MMA certainly, than a skilled striker who just doesn't throw enough?
I don't think there is. Like, I usually I can just watch a fight and not utter a single thing if nobody's in the room with me. Just kind of taking it in and enjoying it. But with this fight, I was audibly, dude, throw. Just like you said, the fact that it's frustrating beyond all belief when you've got a guy that has that type of ability and just won't pull the trigger. It's maddening.
It is maddening. And, for a long time, I've referred now and then to my mythical scream at the TV team. But if you ask me, like, what binds them all together, like my scream at the TV fighters, they're like John Dodson, Michael Johnson, Jonathan Martinez is getting there. The thing they all have in common is they're very skilled strikers that chronically just don't throw enough. Bob Simpson, I'm sorry, but please don't make another excuse for Martinez. No excuses for me this time. Here's the thing. Martinez has one elite weapon. His leg kicks might be the best in that division. They're some of the best in the whole UFC. They're fast. They're hard. They seem to hurt his opponent more than him, even when they do all the right things. Like, I've seen people check his leg kicks and go, ow, that shit hurt. I'm just going to avoid them in the future. For a while, that was enough. It's not enough now. Like, McGee countered his first couple of kicks with punches over the top, and Martinez mostly gave up on his best weapon. Like, that was all it took. So no excuses. He's still a young guy. He, again, still has some things he does at a very good level. He just needs to round out his skill set some. He needs to have a second option for when people are able to nullify or blunt his best weapon. Like, especially in such a highly skilled division as bantamweight, everyone gets there at some point. I mean, a year and a half ago, who am I thinking of? He lives in my town.
Yanez?
Thank you. Yeah, like, dude, if he sees me fumbling over his name, he's going to laugh at me. For a minute there, he looked like the best, one of the best strikers in the division. He looked like a future contender. And then all of a sudden, the weapons that he brought with him, a good 1-2 and a lead hook, weren't enough. And he lost a couple fights badly. And he's had to go back and retool. And he's a young guy. We'll see if it works. But Martinez is in the same place. Yeah, that's pretty much it. And McGee continues to be one of the people that I underestimated wrongly the worst on his arrival in the UFC. He is so much better than I thought he was.
Yeah, no, I've been highly impressed with him. Like, even in this fight, it was clear that he was compromised by Martinez, which, like you said, you're talking about how effective his leg kicks are. Martinez didn't land nearly as many as he should have over those first two rounds, but you could see McGee visibly affected by them at the end of the second round. And in the third round, he was basically in survival mode. Just imagine if Martinez had landed, say 2, maybe 3 more kicks in each of the first 2 rounds. I think we would have had a completely different story. Either he finishes McGee in the third, or the damage is visible enough in the second round that Martinez could have stolen it, But, McGee's tough son of a bitch. He gutted it out. He got the victory, and he made a good point. He acknowledged that he's an old prospect at 34, but he doesn't have a shit ton of miles on his body. So he might still have a couple of years before he reaches his peak. I mean, odds are against it, but it's possible.
And the sport gets occasional latecomers who make a splash for a couple of years just out of nowhere. Like, we always get them. They make for fun stories. Like, I still enjoyed Marcus Davis's little run, where basically he came to MMA already in his 30s after having been really a club level boxer, came through tough, and all of a sudden, he was in the top 10 for a minute. Yeah. So fun stuff from Marcus McGee. Before that, Jim fucking Miller against Damon fucking Jackson. Anytime we get two people fighting each other that Keith and I have both given like the Hall of Fame middle name, you always hate to see one of them lose. Like, what can you even say about this? Like, hit me, Dane.
It's Jim fucking Miller, man. I mean, it was a fun fight for the entirety of it. Fairly even. If I was to give an edge to either one of them, I'd probably say Jackson was the busier striker, so he was probably the one winning. And then knowing that Miller has a very limited gas tank if he's forced to grapple, Jackson did a relatively smart thing in attempting to go get the fight to the ground. He just got the fight to the ground in a stupid manner because he put his head right out there. And we all know that Jim Miller has one of the best damn guillotines in the game, and it did not take long for that thing to be applied before Jackson was tapping. So,
no.
Despite all those miles, Miller can still win a fight because, going into this fight, it looked like Jackson was still a legit UFC fighter. I mean, he retired now, but shit, he looked like he still deserved a spot.
Yeah, it's remarkable. There's not much else to say about it. And yeah, it took a blunder by Jackson this time. A former NAIA All-American. Like, yeah, that's small college, but he was a small college All-American. Like, that now has been doing MMA for well over a decade, knows better than to leave his head hanging out there shooting a double, especially against Jim Miller, because, yeah, it's been cool to watch Miller develop this like late career old man punching power. But aside from that, over the last 5 years, most of what he has is an opportunistic submission game. And first and foremost among that is his guillotine choke. Like, once he did it and jumped guard, it was perfectly applied. Like, Miller did everything absolutely perfectly. 98% of the time when someone jumps a guillotine, on a first round takedown attempt, I mean, I might as well get up and go to the bathroom. I'm like, it's not going to work, but I do have 60 seconds. Here, I'm like, nope, this is over. Like, that's it. Just Miller just calmly makes the adjustments like a guy that has done that thousands of times. Jackson was kicking himself because Jackson himself is a wrestler / grappler who should know better. But yeah, it's all love, man. Jim fucking Miller. I'm in report. Ask, can Miller get to 40 wins? I think that's a big ask. He's at 27 now. I believe he's 27-18 in the UFC.
Is that 40 total or 40 in the UFC though? If it's 40 total, he's sitting at.
If he's 40 total, he is.
Let's see, he's at 38. Is he?
Oh yeah. I think he will. I mean, he wants to get to 50 fights in the UFC, so that'd be 5 more fights. And if he can win 2 of them, he is at 40 career wins. If he can win 3 of them, he's at 30 wins in the UFC, just putting distance between himself and the pack. Like, 5 years ago.
Go ahead.
5 years ago, it was him, Diego Sanchez, and to a lesser extent, Donald Cerrone, just kind of in a 3-man race for the UFC record books on all the longevity-based categories. Clay Guida sneaking up there as well. Miller has left those guys in the dust. Like, I mean, Cowboy and Sanchez are retired at this point. Guida has become kind of a one-time-a-year fighter, and he's not winning when he's out there. And Miller is out there still fighting 2 or 3 times a year, still beating decent dudes when he's out there, beating them in ways he didn't win fights when he was 27. He is now at age 41. It's just wild. It's like a superhero origin story. The guy got superpowers from getting bitten by a tick.
Well, I mean, he's got some good wins over some people as he's gotten older, but if we're being completely honest, there has been some protection going on. He's got wins over the likes of Alex White, Jason Gonzalez, Eric Gonzalez. So some of those wins kind of feel like gimmies, but others not so much. The Jackson one I wasn't sure of. When he fought Donald Cerrone, we didn't know which one of them was more shot at that point. Cerrone retired after that, and Miller's picked up 3 more wins since that one. So I think if the UFC continues to match him up appropriately, I think he'll get 30 wins because I think they would like to see him get that too.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And Kyle Lawheed say Miller versus Claudio Puelles. He clearly just wants to add one fight to the list of fights where my wife looks around the corner and asks, how are those guys even allowed to fight each other? It's rare occasions, but we occasionally get those out of her where she's just like, I thought they were weight classes. Yeah. So prior to that, David Onama, who of course joined the UFC as one of the more standout COVID era late replacements, walked right in, looked like $1 million against Mason Jones. A performance against Jones didn't age great, but Onama proved he belonged no matter what, and kind of paid it forward against late replacements Roberto Romero, because Romero looked pretty solid in defeat. I'm not saying that I think Romero would beat Onama on a full camp. Like, I thought Onama won all 3 rounds, but he at least proved he belongs in my book. Were you impressed? Did you just think it was a bad night for Onama? Like, what was your thoughts on this one?
Definitely not a bad night for Onama. He, aside from Romero coming out like a bat out of hell to begin the fight, which I don't think Onama was quite expecting. Onama looked very good after that period. Worked his body incredibly well, came close to finishing him in the second round. Not a bad night. I think it was just one of those, and we get at least one a year, but frequently there's a fighter who takes a fight on short notice, and I think they're just so amped, so pumped that, to get the opportunity to come into the UFC, that they just kind of shock the world with how good they are, and I think this was one of those performances from Romero. We've seen it before with Lando Venata. Never quite matched the hype after that first fight. It's looking like Basil Hafez could be that type of person as well. So, I hope that that's not the case for Romero. I hope that he has further success, but son of a bitch, he caught everybody off guard with that performance tonight.
He really did, and I love that you bring up the case of Venata, because it shows how far you can ride a good first impression. What did Venata really do? He showed up on short notice and won most of the first round against Tony Ferguson, back when Tony Ferguson was in the middle of building a 12-fight win streak. Ended up losing, but then he hung on. But he's still hung on. He's still around. He has literally never been above 500 in the UFC. Like, he may be the person who's been in the UFC longest without ever being above 500, and it's all based on that first impression. So I think putting on a round of the year type performance in round 1 against Onama, and then generally hanging tough after that, could make a lot of hay for Romero. And beyond that, I agree with Bob Timpson here. Onama has an athleticism and explosiveness you can't teach. And it shows out on the ground too. He is lightning quick, taking advantage of people on the ground. Like, it reminds me a little bit of a featherweight, sometimes lightweight, as he was tonight, like Damon Blackshear, where you see the way Damon Blackshear moves and you assume he's just going to be this lights out striker. And he's a pretty good striker, but he is terrifyingly fast on the ground. Then in the department of things that are not terrifyingly fast, Jonata Diniz took on Marcin Tybura in the other heavyweight fight of the night. Diniz had his moment. He almost finished this thing in the first half of the first round, and he just made the mistake of spending a few seconds too long. And obviously it's easy for me to armchair quarterback this. He is a UFC heavyweight. I am a stay-at-home light heavyweight right now. But once he realized that Tybura wasn't going out, was regaining his wits, was starting to stick him into guard, that was the time to get up and wave Tybura to get back up. Because maybe you knock him out. At the very least, you probably win that round. Instead, he didn't even win the round. Like, he got Tybura'd. Tybura is extremely hard to put out with 1 or 2 shots. Like, it generally takes a Derek Lewis type to do it. And even at 39, he's just super, super slick on the ground. Like, but
no, I still gave Diniz the round just because I don't think Tybura came that close to beating him. But you are 100% right that once it was clear that Tybura wasn't going to be going out, that he was trying to suck him into a scramble, Diniz should have gotten straight back up. Yeah, I know that he's trained in jiu-jitsu and stuff like that. He probably has some good moments in training, but training and in a fight are two completely different things. And Tybura has been there, done that with regards to the fights on the ground game. And at that point, he sucked Diniz into his world. And at that, from there, it was like, okay, this is going to be a Tybura fight. Because I don't think that Diniz has had any major issues in any of his previous fights where it looked like he was into any trouble. I think that style of fight against Tybura that he just went through could be something that damages his long-term progression, because that type of loss, he was completely bloodied at the end of it. Mm-hmm. Looked like he had come out of a horror movie. That type of fight can be something that screws with you mentally. So we're going to get a pretty good indication of how mentally tough Diniz is with this next performance.
Completely agree. And the guy had a pro kickboxing career before MMA. He's been cut before. He's been rocked. He's been knocked down. So this doesn't have to be the end, but there's a difference between getting hurt in kickboxing, getting cut in kickboxing, and just having a 250-pound Polish dude sitting on your chest and elbowing the bejesus out of you. So you're absolutely right. Like, he could, go the way of that Cuban karate guy that just washed out of the UFC after
Rebellis to Spain. Yeah.
Thank you. Man, I have to come up with different jokes to tell about Marcin Tybura. My go-to line forever was that he's only in the UFC because, like, he's not violent enough even to get back into Poland, like, let alone fight for KSW. Just because, he was a low-power guy for, like, such a big dude. But this was some mean stuff tonight, and he's put on some mean I think it started with the Greg Hardy fight. Well, all of a sudden, just something snapped in Marcin Tybura. Maybe he got tired of being the second greatest MMA fighter of all time with no eyebrows after Stefan Struve, and he was like, no, I'm going to take that number one spot. But yeah, good going Marcin Tybura. He has become not just an old man, but a grouchy old man, and I'm here for as long as he wants to do it.
Yeah.
Do you have any feelings any way or the other about the stoppage?
I thought it was appropriate. I I was actually a little bit surprised that they waited as long as they did to do it. Just like I said, Diniz looked like somebody had stolen his soul from him at the end of the round when he got up. So if his corner didn't do it, and obviously they didn't, the doctor needed to step in there and say, okay, he's done. Yeah. I think sometimes that a fighter has that look, and at that point you just need to say, you're done.
And honestly, the ref in me, and by ref I mean I don't ref. I can't ref while I'm working in media. But as someone who's taken and passed the Association of Boxing Commissions course on reffing and judging, that fight was over as soon as Diniz's corner helped him get up. If you can't return to the stool in your own power, it's it's over, like TKO retirement.
Yes.
So yeah, I was fine with it as well. Speaking of retirement, I hope Mickey Gall didn't retire from driving bread trucks from Walmart, because he might be back there soon. Ramiz Brahimaj, the guy has been through some shit in and out of the cage since he's been in the UFC. I'm not saying a win over Mickey Gall on an undercard redeems it all, but it had to be a feel-good moment, because, wow, what a pair of punches that just... it's bad when somebody just drops like a marionette whose strings have been cut, like where they just go down and knee themselves in the face. Like, we always see it from time to time. Jacare versus Weidman. Either Jacare or Romero did it to Weidman, but here Brahimite completely did it to Gall, just caught him right on the side of the head. Gall dropped right over his own feet. There's not much to say. Like, Ramiz Brahimite is a UFC quality welterweight. Mickey Gall is not. And Mickey Gall is not, despite getting ample opportunity to become one. Right? Because of the way he entered the UFC, he was going to get more rope than most people. And he did improve in many ways. Like, his physique is transformed. His striking has improved. I mean, it's improved in the same way that Paul Craig's and Mackenzie Dern's has. Like, it's maybe become as good as it can be for him. He became a better offensive wrestler, though still not like he's the best Mickey Gall ever right now, and he just got completely brained. Like, that's good night for Ramiz Brahimaj. Not a great one for Gall. Thoughts on this one?
Brahimaj looked absolutely fantastic, but there's the but there with regards to it was Mickey Gall. I can point out the fact that typically Gall has been pretty durable, so the fact that he was able to finish him lends credence towards his legitimacy. But like you said, Mickey's received ample opportunity, and Mickey, you're not so fine.
Nope, he is not, and it kills me to have this happen after the booth is all like, he has a new child, he has a new lead, like, he's newly motivated. Like, don't tell me that about someone who's about to get his ass kicked. Like, don't bring feelings into this. Assuming he's gone from the UFC at this point, I wish him the best of whatever comes next. I mean,
100%.
He was a very good grappler even before. If he wants to keep grappling, maybe he'll still be on Fight Pass. Who knows?
Yeah. No, and it was never a question of whether or not he was a quitter or anything like that. Gall always came and gave his absolute best every time, but he just didn't have the chops.
John Butterfield asks this, and I'm going to use it as a segue into the next fight we're going to talk about here. At this point, Ramiz Brahimaj has beaten Sasha Plotnikov, Michael Gilmore, and Mickey Gall. Has anyone beaten worse competition than Ramiz? And assuming that he means in the welterweight division, I agree, because otherwise the answer is, well, yes, every single heavyweight. Chase Sherman got like 4 wins in the UFC.
On 17 tries.
Yes, exactly. And he trains here in Houston sometimes, and if he sees me laughing at him like that, I'll die. Here's the thing. In any division between 135 and 170 in the UFC, even bad competition, if you win 3 or 4 in a row in those divisions, you're doing something right, because nobody's that bad. And I mean, Brahimaj versus Plotnikov, didn't he win that fight despite like losing a whole ear? Like, wasn't that the one where like half his ear fell off?
That was the fight with Griffin.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, and he lost that because his ear fell off. All right, yes. Okay. Anyway, before that fight, Basil Hafez versus Oban Elliott in a battle of mildly interesting prospects. Like, Keith and I were both firmly of the mind that neither of these guys is probably a future top 15 guy at 170. Just almost no one is. It's too tough. Like, a few years ago, you had like, you had people like, Vicente Luque and the Argentinian guy?
Santiago Ponzinibbio.
Yeah, winning like 6-7 fights in a row just to fight a borderline top 10-ish guy. You have to do a lot. So I'm not saying that either of them is bad fighters, but even by that standard, I might have underestimated Oban Elliott just a little bit. Like, I watched Elliott fights in Cage Warriors. Like, since I've been Sherdog's main video producer, I've ended up watching a lot more Cage Warriors just because I get hyped for the cards after hearing Sean Sheehan talk about them, and after seeing him interview Elliott a couple times. And I thought, okay, Elliott is a bone stock UK welterweight. He's not the biggest, he's not the most athletic, but he's tough as nails. He's what Jay Petrie would call a Boston-style face-first striker, and he's underrated on the ground, like as an offensive wrestler and as a grappler, like just very much like his mentor, Jack Shore. Elliott might have a little more than that to him. Clearly, he has some numbing power. And, yeah, I mean, he's now won 3 fights in a row in the UFC welterweight division. Like, even if they're all bad guys, and I don't think they're all bad guys, like Elliott's doing something right.
Yeah, no, I was 100% with you. Like, it took until after his second UFC fight for me to jump on board the Elliott train. Like, I thought he was, we'll say, a step above Reese McGee. And given that McGee is 0-4 in his UFC run, that's not saying too much for Elliott. But no, he's been much better than what I initially thought. And going into this fight with Hafez, I thought Elliott was a pretty safe pick on that one, and so far so good because he deaded Hafez pretty bad. And what the hell was up with the people letting Hafez get up and walk after that fight? Holy shit! They damn near let him face plant.
Like, and Mark Goddard, whatever fault he may have as a ref, lack of control of what's going on in the cage is not normally one of his faults. Like that was strange. And hell, if I had my way, Hafez would still be laying down right now. Because here's the thing: when Elliott hit him with that right, it knocked out his mouthpiece. So he dropped like 10 straight hammer fists right into the grill of a dude that had no protection. Like the inside of Hafez's mouth right now must look like hamburger.
Yeah.
Ow, ow, ow. I hope all of his teeth are still in place. So, Oban Elliott, guy to watch. I didn't ask, to come up with any possible next matchups for him, just because, again, any division from 135 to 170, give me a guy that's outside the top 15 coming off a win, match him up with pretty much anyone else outside of the top 15 coming off a win, you probably have a pretty good fight.
Yeah. No, he's definitely got more than I thought. And even though I think that the commentary team hyped up his ability to talk on the mic a little bit more than what they should have, he's not bad on it.
I'm just happy that I can understand him without subtitles.
Unlike Paul Craig, right?
Unlike Paul Craig, like Scotland is not that big a place. Scotland has fewer people than Houston. It's not that big. How do some people from Scotland talk like, David Tennant, and then others talk like Groundskeeper Willie? I don't get it. And then it's similar for Welsh people. Like I can understand Elliott. Yeah.
Hey, and I can understand Groundskeeper Willie. I can't understand Paul Craig, so. Okay.
More like Scottish Boomhauer, where he may literally not be saying any words that make sense, and
yeah.
I know
Boomhauer's
down here, it's like, you're from Louisiana, aren't you? Like, yeah.
Yeah, no, even up in my area, you meet the occasional Boomhauer, so everybody knows a Boomhauer.
Oh, my goodness. We could have a whole separate podcast on weird Utah pronunciations. Like we could do that. For those that don't know,
yes, we could.
Dayne lives in the ironically named city of Pleasant Grove, Utah. I lived near Pleasant Grove for quite a few years. I did not find it pleasant, but
I no worries. I'm enjoying it here, but I understand where it's not everybody's cup of tea.
Well, if it is your cup of tea, just don't drink it in front of people because they don't like tea in Utah. Yeah. All right. Before that, we had the opener. Veronica Hardy versus Eduardo Moura. Moura, well, you know what? Give me your take on this one. I feel like I've been doing like 90% of the talking. I've been an asshole. You tell me what you thought of this fight.
All right, asshole. No.
Yeah, you can sit in for Keith anytime. That's exactly what Keith would have done. All right.
I thought Moura looked very good. I hope that she does not bother trying to cut down to 115 again. If her comments in her interview backstage is any indication, she's not going to. She says she felt stronger at 125, and I think she looked stronger. You know, she wasn't depleted. She had plenty of energy. Her counters were quick and sharp. Hardy really couldn't get anything going just because everything that she tried to do, Moraes seemed to have an answer for. And that's saying something, because Hardy's kind of become a little bit of a darling in the eyes of a lot of the analysts as of the last little bit, because, you know, her husband's really gotten her going in the right direction. Dan Hardy, you know, because Hardy always had a lot of potential. She has a lot of athleticism, a lot of tools to work with, and she just never put it together until she made her comeback, I think, at the beginning of 2023. And Mora just stopped any momentum that she had dead in its tracks. And it looks like Mora could be a serious problem moving up. Yep. Yeah, Bob Jimson seems to think so.
I'm with you here. And I mean, Bob Timpson is right, because 125 is so wide open. Like, just it's not a great division right now. But yeah, Mora looked great. My call on the preview was that Mora was going to be obviously the larger woman in the cage, even though she's the one that was moving up from strawweight plus. She looked it. Like, my whole notes for this fight are Hardy got bullied, and bullied is in all caps. I mean, the dynamic was supposed to be that Hardy was going to be much quicker and sharper on the feet, and it was going to be on Mora to either hit her with enough power on the feet to kind of even things up, or be able to track her down and get her onto the ground. She kind of did both. I mean, she won the first round without even really taking her down. Like, she took her down in the last 45 seconds, but she was getting the better of the striking even before that. And then second and third rounds, she took her down quicker. And yeah, round two, she was all over her on top. Hardy didn't really have any answer. And what killed Hardy in her first run in the UFC was getting bullied on the ground, like specifically just getting stuck in bottom position, getting tapped out a few times, but also just even when she didn't get tapped out, just not seeming to have any reliable ways to get back to the feet. So it was just, you get taken down and it's, I lose this round and try to survive and try to box him up again next round. This felt like a bit of a regression to that for Hardy. Like, I'm still mildly high on her in this second act, but she's got some things to take back to the drawing board for sure. I'm with Bob here. Mora has the potential to become a title contender, because women's flyweight right now, I feel like it's kind of like men's middleweight and light heavyweight are, where there are very good fighters in the top 3 or 4, and then outside of that, it's full of fighters that are skilled but vulnerable. Like, there's nobody outside of the top 5 at 125 that I would absolutely pick Eduardo Mora to lose 2-3 months from now. Just
yeah, and no disrespect to how great she actually is, but there's a reason why Valentina Shevchenko has been able to be at or near the top of that division basically since its inception.
Yeah, and usually like a minus 1,000 favorite over her next challenger.
Yep.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. That's it. That is all. What is it? Do we end up with 12 fights that made it to the cage?
Yep.
12. That's all 12 fights. Let's get to the fun stuff. Let's see. We have the awards. We have a fight of the night and 3 performances of the night.
Ooh,
I'm going to assume.
I like that.
Yeah, I'm going to assume that anybody watching has either been following on social media or watching the UFC post-fight press conference and probably already know who the award winners are. So rather than have anyone guess, I'll just ask, whom would you give fight of the night, and whom would you have given performance of the night bonuses to?
I think fight of the night's definitely going to go to the co-main event. As for the other 3, let's see here. I'm sure that they probably give one to Jones. They've got to give one to Brahimai and Elliott as well. So let's see here. Would I give that last one to Jones? Sorry, I'm looking over the list really quick to see.
You were just fine.
Oh, nope, not Jones. I'd totally give it to Miller. So I'd say Miller, Elliott, and Brahim with fight of the night going to Oliveira and Chandler.
All right. You are correct on the fight of the night. The fight of the night went to Oliveira versus Chandler. I'm kind of with Bob here. I would have been A-okay with the UFC just scrapping fight of the night, as they often do, and just giving out 4 or 5 performance bonuses of the night. Because if they had done that, then probably nobody would have gotten shortchanged. Because as it is, your fight of the night is Oliveira versus Chandler. Your performances of the night go to Oban Elliott for his crushing knockout, Ramiz Brahimaj for his crushing knockout, and John Jones for his crushing knockout. And Jim Miller does not, he comes up empty-handed after tapping out Damon Jackson. That's unfortunate, because I certainly thought he was deserving as well. And yeah, I'm kind of with Bob on the fight of the night thing. Like, except for the first 3 minutes of the 5th round, this was a fairly suspense-free fight. Oliveira tooled Chandler. So yeah, it felt kind of like a straightforward drubbing with a really interesting finish.
Yeah.
Like if
that
was the best fight of the night, then bag it and give Jim Miller and Marcin Tybura a little extra cash.
Oh yeah. No, it was one of those deals where when I heard there's a fight of the night, I'm like, well, there wasn't really anything that was a barn burner, but son of a bitch if that 5th round wasn't one of the all-time greats. So
yeah, 5th round was incredible. I mean, we had 2, I feel, round of the year contenders tonight between Onama and Romero's 1st round and Oliveira and Chandler's 5th round. We had 24 fighters fight on this card. And while Dana White's Contender Series is shuttered for the season, they'll be back next year, possibly for 2 seasons. And if they have 2 seasons, that probably means 60 or 70 new fighters in the UFC. That means some of these people have got to go. It's time for the cut list. If you're watching this, you're probably familiar. Keith and I normally wield the power to circle a life. Some fighters got to go so that others can join. Looking at this, I have got a cut list that is one. You know what? I think I only have 1 fighter on my cut list.
I already know who that is. I got 2.
All right. I'm open to being convinced. Give me your first one.
Oh, it's Mickey Gall.
He was mine.
Yeah.
Gall is, he's below 500 he's below 500 in the UFC now. He's 6-7. He's 7-7 overall. Nobody he's beaten is still in the UFC, and 2 of the people he's beaten should never have been in the UFC. And I say that as someone who considers Mike Jackson a pretty good personal friend. So Gall goes. Who else you got?
Long Top.
James Yontop, you know what? Fighters stepping up on short notice normally get a reprieve from the UFC and normally get a reprieve from me. But if you missed the catch weight that you requested, your rope gets a lot shorter. I am fine with James Yontop going. And honestly, Bob Chimpson saying, send Martinez to PFL. I think sending him to PFL may be needlessly cruel, but releasing him and letting him go where he will might not be the worst thing. And I say the same about Yontop. Either or both of those guys could get cut, come back 18 months from now as a transformed fighter. I mean, look at Yusuf Zalal. Yusuf Zalal was, he was probably cut a little prematurely, but nonetheless, he didn't seem to be anything special. Went away, picked up some fights in LFA, and all you'd hear out of Factory X is, you guys just wait until Yusuf gets back to the UFC. He's killing us all in that room. And when you think of all the 135, 145, 155 pound fighters at Factory X that would have to be impressed to, for that word to come out. Yeah. So Yontop and Martinez both, like Martinez in particular, like as far as I'm concerned, Yontop could just stay and take his lumps, but Martinez needs to shake something up. Because I'm not saying he's better than Marcus McGee or better than Jose Aldo, but I think he should be better than the Jonathan Martinez that he's been in his fights with those guys. And whether it is a thing where he needs to see a sports psychiatrist, as people in the Sherdog forums were saying, or he just needs reps in different situations than what he's getting. I think some time to develop outside of the brightest lights might not be the worst thing for him.
Yeah. And you actually took exactly the reason why I say, give you on top a fresh start, let him go on the regional scene, pick up a couple of wins, get his confidence back, maybe gives him some room to shake things up, just like you said. So that was sometimes cutting a guy is the best thing for them, to be honest. Yeah. So
and go to a different regional scene. Like Peru's regional promotions are terrible. There's a reason that like the best fighter from Peru has been training in Mexico forever. Like and fought regionally in Mexico, not in Peru, Ecuador, Colombia. So anyway, next up, Bulls and Bears. You guys know what they are. Stock market reference. Things whose stock is either up or down after UFC 309. Get yours into the chat. We will read some of them off. We'll put some up on the screen. Dane, do you want to do Bulls or Bears first?
Ooh, let's start with the Bears tonight.
So we'll stay negative. And do you want to go first, or do you want me to go first?
Oh hell, asshole! You've been talking. You can keep going. You can go first.
He's just hoping I'll blow my voice out entirely. People whose stock is down after tonight. I tend to avoid the main and co-main events in these just because the stakes tend to be pretty obvious. But I will throw out there massive favorites. 3 people, like John Jones entered the cage as a massive favorite and delivered. I mean, we talked at length about that. But south of that, Bo Nickal, Mauricio Ruffy, and David Onama all entered the cage as enormous favorites. And to some extent or another, all 3 of them failed to deliver. Like I just defended Bo Nickal's approach to the fight. I defended his performance, but there's no question that people were booing, and I understand why. And his public perception will take a bit of a hit. Then Mauricio Ruffy all of a sudden looked vulnerable, and David Onama is going to be fine. But if you're a minus 1,200 favorite, you shouldn't be having a round of the year with that guy. You're supposed to be crumpling him into a small ball and tossing him into the ringside trash can. Since I just named 3 guys right there, I'll just toss out one more Bear. That's going to be Veronica Hardy. Again, she came back after a lengthy layoff, seemed to be a transformed fighter. She might get back on track after this, but just considering that she lost tonight, she lost as a slight favorite, and she lost in a way that was very reminiscent of the way she lost her first time around. It has to give you pause if you're on the Veronica Hardy train. What do you got?
I've got Basil Hafez. He had that incredible short notice performance against Jack Della Maddalena, made it a split decision loss. After that, he barely was able to beat Mickey Gall, somebody who we both agree doesn't really deserve a spot at this point. And even though Oban Elliott looked good, Hafez looked terrible. He had a bad game plan. He largely just seemed to stand there and let Elliott do whatever the hell he wanted. So, I compared him to Lando Veneta. Veneta at least had the incredible knockout of John McDessie that got him some steam. I think the steam is out of Hafez at this point. I also have Karini Silva. She was being set up to have a bright stage to just shoot up the women's flyweight ranks, and she completely crapped the bed. Depending on how you saw it, maybe you scored the fight for her, but wasn't a good fight. Her stock is definitely taking a hit. She might need
That's a great call, man. She was a minus 250 favorite against somebody that was in a title eliminator a year ago.
Yeah.
And shit the bed. The flip side is Bulls, things whose stock is up. Do you want to go first? Do you want me to go first? What do you got?
This one's a little bit harder. I definitely have Oban Elliott on there, because like I said, I think there were a lot of people like both of us that didn't have a hell of a lot of stock on Elliott when he first came into the UFC, but people are buying at this point, myself included. Got to give some love to Roberto Romero as well. No, he didn't win, but at the beginning of the week, most of us didn't know his name. Now he's one of the brighter talking points with regards to the event. Like you said, had a hell of a round of the year candidate for the first round and just looked like a real gamer in there. He looks like he could be somebody that sticks around for a while. And it's kind of hard for the last one, but I'll say Marcus McGee, somebody that came in on short notice. I want to say early 2023. Didn't think much of it because he's old for a prospect, and damn it if he hasn't been tearing things up, and very well could enter into the UFC rankings by the middle of next week. So I'll give it to Marcus McGee.
Yeah. Keith Schillen, never heard of him, but
I heard he's an asshole too.
Yeah. He's a masshole, even though he's from Rhode Island. It's the accent. Much love to Keith, who, of course, was on site at Madison Square Garden for most of this week, including tonight. I will add a couple of bulls. Ramiz Brahimaj. Keith and I had two unanimous upset picks on this card. One of them, Jonathan Martinez, was a mistake that shall not be repeated. The other one, Ramiz Brahimaj, came out looking great. And most importantly, because again, he's going to need to win 6 or 7 more fights in a row before we're talking about him as a top 10 guy. So more realistically, this is the kind of performance that's going to get him off the prelims. If you just knock the shit out of somebody and you're charming, well-spoken, have a compelling story, it's so hard to separate yourself from the pack in the UFC. There are 600 fighters in the UFC. A casual fan can name about 30 of them. And to be one of those 30 without being a champ is really, really difficult. It's the reason Sam Alvey stuck around so long, even while he was losing fights. It's so hard for the UFC to get memorable people. Brahimaj did some work to separate himself from the welterweight pack. That's good enough to get him bumped up here. And I'm just going to throw out one more. Jim fucking Miller. I would have been happy with any results in this fight. They're both good fighters. They're both good dudes. They've both got good stories. But considering that this, again, just pushes Miller a little further up those all-time lists. Well, he's already at the top of the all-time list. It pushes everybody down some all-time lists. What a great night for him. Stock up, and he's just so clearly having fun with all of this right now. It's such a different vibe than fighters who are his age still in the UFC and struggling, Yeah. It's just been a lot of fun. It's been a fun ride. Outside of that, dude, seriously. I've got a couple of dude seriouslys. If you've got any, you can throw them in between mine or after mine. I feel bad with this one because I feel like I pick on Bruce Buffer more times than not. But, dude, yes, you're there because of your catchphrases and your energy, and that is brand equity that you've built over literally almost 30 years of doing this. But your actual job is to pronounce people's names right and accurately describe to them what is about to happen and what has just happened. That's literally your whole job. He has said Derek Cleary's name hundreds of times and still can't get it right. It is fucking disrespectful. Derek Cleary. It's not hard. It's not Russian. It's not Portuguese. Derek Cleary. Then words have meanings. You can't announce John Jones as the undisputed heavyweight champ when there is an interim champ. That is the opposite of undisputed. It's disputed. You're literally saying wrong shit. And I don't think that the problem is that he doesn't know what words mean. I think it is just so lazy. He's just so lazy that he just goes into autopilot mode. The reigning, defending, undisputed. He doesn't even think about the words that are coming out of his mouth. and they're wrong. Jon Jones is not the undisputed champ. It's disputed. It's disputed enough that if and when he fights Aspinall, he might not even be the favorite. Who knows? Like, it's disputed. What the words mean. Other dude, seriously. I'm sure I had some others, but they're all lost in time, like tears in rain. I've seen things you people wouldn't believe. What do you got?
The UFC was running promotional videos with regards to Jon Jones and Stipe, and they showed the clip after Jones beat Cyril Gahn. And what is it that Jon Jones says? He says, the UFC gives the fans what they want. Dude, seriously, you're rubbing it in our face. The UFC did not give us what we wanted. We wanted you to fight Tom Aspinall. Now, granted, I understand there's more to it than that, but no, they did not give us what we want. Assholes. See, I didn't call you one this time. Let's see here. Another dude, seriously. John Anik says that James Yontop is in the UFC's good graces, win or lose. We all know that one of Dana White's pet peeves is fighters missing weight. And given that Yontop even got a request for a catch weight granted and he still missed, dude, seriously, I don't think Yontop is in the UFC's good graces. A good dude, seriously. Paul Craig coming out to Mbop. You got that one, didn't you?
That was a choice, man. Like, and dude, so
seriously,
somebody in the Sherdog editorial Slack posted like this old ass picture of Hansen where the three of them looked like Chelsea Clinton, Mary Kate, and Ashley Olsen. Like, they just looked like three chicks of varying cuteness back in the day.
Yeah.
Shout out to, I think they were from Kansas. Kansas's greatest export to the world of music. Yeah.
Wasn't Kansas, huh?
Somewhere in the Midwest.
Oh, no. I'm just saying you would think Kansas would be the best one coming out of Kansas, but hey, whatever.
Oh, God, Kansas sucks. All right.
Then, I got one more dude.
Oh,
seriously.
Please, hit me.
Dude, Keith Peterson. Did you not see the back of the headshots to Charles Oliveira?
Thank you.
Seriously.
Like, I know some of the rules changed tonight, but not those.
Yeah.
Not that one.
Yeah, no, that was pretty egregious. Like,
that was, it was, I can't believe I didn't mention it during our breakdown of the fight. I can't believe I didn't mention it now. Thank you for the catch, because honestly, that might be the most egregious strikes to the back of the head foul I've ever seen at like the UFC level that wasn't called.
Yeah.
Like it bumps Johnny Walker versus Ryan Spann, where Spann was going for the takedown and Walker like elbowed him in the back of the head like 10 times. This was worse because it was a grounded fighter and they could not have been more to the brainstem. This was like accurate illegal ground and pound. Yeah, it was horrible. And if Chandler had won that way, we'd be having a whole different conversation right now.
Yes.
And I personally would be more sour on the whole thing. Like,
yeah. You know that somewhere that Dominic Cruz is pointing and laughing and saying, "I told you Keith Peterson was the worst."
Oh, you know what? And he's never been great, but he's been falling off recently. And I don't know if he's like switched to like, diet cigars or something, but he looked a little wasted away tonight too. Hope he's doing all right.
We'll have to ask Charles Oliveira if he smelled like cigarettes.
All right. Letter grade for the card.
Given the magnitude, I can't give it more than a B-. The main event didn't live up to the hype. The co-main event was fun, even if it was fairly one-sided. But the rest of it, as far as the primary fights, just kind of blah. Yeah, I get where G6 is coming from. B- is probably being generous. I admit that, but I don't know. I love just the vibe of these types of events as well. So maybe that's pushing me over the top.
Yeah, I'd fall somewhere in the middle there. I'm good with a C plus as well. Ultimately, if you've got a pay-per-view event, especially one of the UFC's big tent events, like their Madison Square Garden event, and you have at least me going, they could have gotten away with not even handing out a fight of the night. That's not a good sign.
That's true.
Then add to that the fact that south of the top 2 fights, there was a lot of prospect fights on here, and so many of the prospects underperformed. Like, yes. I'm not as excited as I hoped I would be. So yeah, C plus feels about right to me. The toughest question of the night, the most important question of the night. Who's your listener of the night?
Oh boy. Ant Walker came in, had some really good comments, but at the same time, he's usually there. Oh boy, Bob Jimson wouldn't shut up, but that's what we expect from Bob Jimson.
Hey, throw in legendary volume. He's the Mac way of the comment section.
Ay caramba, this is I really do hate this part just because there usually is a lot of I'll say I'm in report. Going for somebody who doesn't seem to be on here as regularly as some of the others, but just with some really good sniper-like comments. So yeah, I'm in report.
I'm good with I'm in report getting it. I love Ant. He and I had a podcast for several years together. He's a former co-worker here at Sherdog. He's officially not allowed to win because I still consider him an industry guy, even if he ironically refers to himself as just a high-level fan these days. But hell, I gave you listener of the night a couple times when you were still a bloody elbow. So, clearly I play fast and loose with the rules, just like Keith Peterson. That is it for the Sherdog Radio Network recap for UFC 309. Thank you so much for listening, for participating as usual. Like, a lot of great takes tonight, a lot of not so great takes. Everybody generally respectful, just how we like it. Next week, I don't think there's going to be a preview for UFC Macau. Here's the reason. Keith isn't going to be available. So it would either be me soloing this shit or trying to rope somebody else into tape studying 18 Chinese fighters that they've never seen fight before. Also, this card is taking place at like 3 a.m. There'll be a recap because sure, I'll do a recap at noon, but I don't think there's going to be a preview for this. If that changes, y'all throw it out on the Sherdog socials. But yeah, so you may not hear from us until this time next week, next Saturday after UFC Macau. The Petr Yan versus Davison Figueiredo fight is fantastic. So is Xiaonan Yan versus Tabitha Ricci. The rest, it gets shaky as you go down. Like, a lot of those prospects on the bottom half of the card, they're not good. So anyway, that's it. Thank you again for watching, for listening, for participating. We always appreciate you. We don't take this for granted. Well, I don't. Dayne might. You'd have to ask him. But we will catch you next time.